let's continue. The lecture 8 is dedicated to Noological analysis of the modernity. I presume that now it is more or less easy to anticipate what will be the result of this analysis. First of all, I would suggest the reading of the traditionalist school, very important authors as René Guenon, Julius Evola, Titus Burkhardt, Fridtjof Schuon, Michel Valsan, or Nasr, who have explained that the modernity is a special concept. So the modernity is not something that has to do with contemporaneity, because now in contemporary, in actual moment, we could have modern society, pre-modern society, post-modern society, archaic society, society with religious, middle age type of society, but living in today's worlds. So in contemporary, it is not, that doesn't mean modern. That is very important aspect, conceptual element. So modernity, when we are speaking about modernity, we don't speak about what exists now. It is description of kind, of type, of society, of structure, of existential horizon, of civilization. That is a little bit atemporal. So we could imagine modernity now. We could imagine modernity belonging to the past or to the future. And that is already very important. So if we consider the modernity not as the fate, or we have it now, and we will have it tomorrow, and so on. So we are obliged to be modern. And traditionalists affirmed that to be modern is decision. You can be modern, you can be not modern. And they have created two concepts, the tradition, and the modernity. Tradition and modernity. So modernity, it is not what something actual. That is a kind of society or civilization, of world vision, of picture of the reality. That is one thing. And there is tradition. That's the picture of reality, the civilization, the culture, the society. That is different. And between them, affirmed the traditionalists, there is antagonism. That is very important because that gives us the possibility to study modernity not as something inevitable, but as something that is the product of concrete historical development based on concrete sequence of decisions and choices. And the modernity is artificial, I would say. It was artificially created. It is not something that went by itself. So modernity is not natural. Modernity was created, is supported, is defended, is adjusted, is developed, but there is a kind of free will behind the majority. That is not fatality. There is not mechanical law of modernity. Because we know many societies that are not modern. For example, Islamic society, Indian society in some aspect, archaic society. They are not modern. They exist today. And if we consider the majority of the mankind, of humanity, today, in 21st century lives not in the modern society. The society, they belong to traditional society. So modernity has something to do with contemporary world. But we could study, we should understand that separately from contemporary. And we could speak about structure of modernity. So modernity is something structural, constructed, and that could be deconstructed. It should be deconstructed. Postmodernist philosophy is based precisely on this, on deconstruction of modernity, with their special aspect, but that is possible, and deconstruction of modernity, and that is crucial point, and knowledge could be made from two positions. It could be made, the construction of modernity, with postmodernists, with their hyper-modern ethics. So they are disappointed, postmodernists, majority of postmodernists are disappointed with the modernity because the modernity didn't fulfill its promises, doesn't satisfy them, their hopes and anticipations. So that is a kind of despair. They are in despair that modernity couldn't accomplish the goal it declared. So that is postmodernity in the sense that modernity is too small. It is not enough. The modernity is not enough, and they try to deconstruct modernity in order to show that it should be overcome, in order to create what modernity wanted to do, but couldn't accomplish by inner limitations. In the eyes of postmodernists, the modernity was too traditional, excessively traditional. That modernity could not overcome tradition, but it should, and it shall, with the postmodernity. So that is a kind of deconstruction of modernity that shows that modernity is not so much modern as it needed to be, in the eyes of postmodernist ethic. But what is interesting in this method, they show the artificial doing that. They show artificial nature of modernity, that modernity is creation, that modernity is based on the decision. So if we could deconstruct something, that someone has constructed that. So we can use some methods of postmodernity precisely dealing with modernity. But what is much more important, that is the other possibility to deconstruct the modernity in much more radical way that postmodernist critics. That is traditionalism, that regards the modernity as a kind of the type of the structure that was created against the tradition. So that is consideration of modernity as anti-tradition. It could be represented as a kind of reversal of all traditional values. And what was in the traditional society with the sign plus, and the modernity is with minus. So that is a kind of reversal of the traditional state of thing, as well. That was based on decision, subversion, the will to destroy and to exchange the thesis with antithesis in some way. So modernity is antithesis for tradition. That is traditionalist position. And what is interesting, that if postmodernists, they agree with the goal of modernity, so they criticize modernity as something not enough, or something not sufficient. But traditionalists criticize the modernity as something awful, as something completely negative, as nihilism, as destruction, as perversion, as subversion, as demonic design of reality, or as a kind of Antichrist's civilization created by the conscious partisans of the Satan. So the modernity, in the eyes of traditionalists, is conscious satanic creation. So there is traditional, divine society, divine world, divine soul, and there is satanic tradition, satanic order, satanic of things, satanic cosmos, and so on. That is very interesting because this kind of deconstruction of modernity exists as well, including in our world, and we could use both. In order to deal with modernity, we could have deconstruction from the left, postmodern deconstruction, with elaborated methodology, with traditionalist deconstruction. So I don't insist now on who is right. I try to show that there are two possibilities to deal with modernity outside of the pretensions of modernity. Because modernity say, oh, that is necessary, this mechanical law of development, the progress, the man is good, the man is developing, the progress is inevitable, and so on. All that is questioned by postmodernity, and all this is questioned by traditionalism. And if we unite both criticism, methodologically we obtain something completely new. So we see, joining both methodologies, we see at least one thing for certain, that we are dealing with something absolutely artificial, because both criticism shows that with all the power of persuasion of scientific approach, from different positions, and that is very, very important. So we could regard the modernity as something conceptual, structural, and in some way eternal. So modernity exists not only in contemporary world, but it is structural. If we could describe the modernity with mathematical, for example, structure, values, anti-values, plus, minus, if we could have the kind of formula of modernity, so it could not be contemporary. So this formula could exist in the different contexts. So that opens to us the way to analyze the modernity as something that could be turned from the contemporary moment. So that is very important. So we could study modernity as we are studying, for example, Chinese culture or Roman culture in the same way. So that's something that is accomplished, but that belongs to some eternal text. We could scale to choose different scales. We could go closer, go further from modernity. So that is object. Modernity is the object of the study. And when we try to concretize in noological, in Noomakhia perspective, what is modernity, we have already spoken, that is the anti-Christianism. Because we had in our European history, we had tradition about which traditionalists speak in the form of Christian tradition. And we have shown in the previous lecture how this Christian tradition included in itself pre-Christian structures and in the European Logos. So tradition now, in this noological version, is the same as Christianity, but at the same time is the same as the alliance between Logos of Apollo with Logos of Dionysus in concrete historical Christian form. So that was and is tradition that we could identify and as well describe as type. So if we have this concrete and positive description of what is tradition, it is not something vague. It is concrete. That is Logos of Apollo with its structures, its symmetry, verticality, with Logos of Dionysus, purified Dionysus, Apollonian Dionysus in case of dialectic embedded in this version. So everything is quite concrete. And we try, for example, to deny all that, to make a kind of reversal of that. We receive the other type, no Apollo, no Dionysus, and now it is not only nihilism or destruction or parody, as traditionalists say, but in our Noological analysis, we see clearly what is a so-called positive content of modernity. So the modernity is not only destruction, the chaos, the anti, against. It is not nihilism. In the eyes of Logos of Apollo, there is no Logos of Cybele. There is nothing. There is destruction, matter, or something. But in three Logos concept, in Noomakhia, there is a Logos of Cybele. There is a kind of structure that we could imagine, that we could describe with positive inner relations. That is why Noomakhia and Noology is so important now, because we, thanks to Noomakhia, we have the key to deeper and a better understanding on what is modernity. Because in that, when traditionalists criticize the modernity, they use negative term, that is overthrow of the traditional values, negative nihilism. That is conservative discourse. They belong to the tradition, they belong to Logos of Apollo and Dionysus, and they consider that the end of this situation as the end of time, so there's nihilism, the negative terms. And maybe that is the reason why they could not get the essence of modernity, because the modernity is purely negative for them. It is purely negative, purely positive for modernists. They could, as well, they could not understand the modernity, because it is for them, that's all. That's beauty, that's progress, that is something inevitable, that's nature, casual sequence of the events that we could not change, something predefined. They could not, modernists don't understand the modernity. And traditionalists understand better than modernists, but in negative way. So they as well, they understand not enough. And with Noomakhia, we could say, no, there is not only destruction, there is not only nihilism, there is not only chaotic transformation. That is new Logos. That, not new so much, that there are other Logos, third one. And if we apply to the modernity this concept, we obtain completely new vision and perspective to understand the modernity. And modernity is in the reality ancient, and that is not paradox. It is absolutely ancient because it is precedent to the Indo-European Turanian invasion. So we are dealing not with something new. We are dealing in the modernity with something very, very old that existed before Indo-European invasion, before Turanian Logos of Apollo. So in that case, the modernity is old, and in the European tradition, Christianity is new, something new, because it was after, it came after. And the modernity is a return to the pre-Indo-European aspect of civilizations. That is an extremely important remark, because now we are dealing not with something as the end of some natural construction. There is nothing natural in human history. Everything is based on the laws. So modernity is a moment of Noomakhia that came as the new attack of titans against the gods. And this one, that is successful attack. So the modernity is the victory of the titans, of Cybele, of the serpent, over God. Successful attack. So that is the moment of Noomakhia that existed in potentially as possibility always. And when the power of light became too weak, too small, the titans, they were liberated from the hell, from the chains, and they made interruption again in the realm of the order, and they have submitted the humanity to their rule. So that is not purely negative description. There is event, and we could speak about the logos of modernity. So the modernity has a logos. In order to trace the modernity, we could come to the event or the time when modernity started. That was the end of Middle Ages, and Renaissance time was the border time. So that was precisely the moment where this Noomakhia and Titanomachia reached the critical stage in Renaissance. That is the name for the special battle between Logos of Apollo against the Logos of Cybele, where the battle was lost by gods. The battle was lost in the European tradition. The battle was lost by these patriarchy existential horizon in favor of this alternative logos. And we see multiple aspects of that. That is beginning of capitalism, of bourgeois, of national state. That was beginning of secularization of the state and the society, the end of Christianity, and that was reflected in the science, because the modern science is a kind of necessary aspect of the modernity. So we are living in the world where our understanding of the reality is based on the science. And this science, modern science, it is called modern science, to make a difference with Middle Ages science. This science is very special. We could consider its structure. When we begin to read the first texts of author of modern science, we see very special feature. They criticize Aristotle. Aristotle, that was a kind of dogmatic scientific concept of Middle Ages, and that was scholastic, that was Christian, and in Orthodox context, Aristotelian teaching was adapted by John Damascene to Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox doctrine, and the Western Christianity that was scholastic tradition, based on combination between Platonic and Aristotelian concept. And Aristotle, and at the lesser scale, Platonism, were overthrown in the beginning of the scientific world vision. And we could trace what concretely was attacked, how these Noomakhia were developed in this in the field of the scientific theories. I have dedicated my first thesis to the concept of creation and appearance of modern science. First of all, there was the criticism against a natural places theory of Aristotle, a natural or anisotropic version of the space. Anisotropic version of the space or understanding of the space of the natural places Aristotelian theory was based on the concept of what is movement. According to Aristotle, everything has its own goal, its own entelechy, and the goal is the final reason. So that is equivalent with natural space. So everything has its natural space, and the movement of the thing, it is moving towards this natural place. When the thing reaches its natural space, the movement ends. So the movement is because all the things are not in the natural space. They are moving toward them, but they prevent each other to get there, and that defines the nature of movement. So everything strives to reach its natural space, and because it is a little chaotic under the sphere of moon, according to Aristotle, there is chaotic movement. So everybody hurt the other. So nobody is in its own space. Only God has reached from the beginning. Internally, He is in His space, natural space. Everything other is out, and that is why everything is living. Everything is moving. That's the explanation of the nature of kinetic movement. But that creates the special space with the center, absolute center, and absolute center for each thing. There is the absolute center for each thing is its natural place. So everything is striving somewhere that is more important and more natural for things than other place. So you could be at home. The concept of home, very important. The home is natural place. We are going home, and everything is going home. It is return. And it is return to the God, but only God is in His own place. That is in immovable mover, immutable. It's something that moves everything, but is not moved by anything. That's the concept. So the space or the cosmos is theocentric. The space is theocentric, and there is a kind of sacred geography with the special sacred centers, with special points of cult, and all cosmos has the meaning, the structure, and reason. So there is a center. The main attack of Galileo Galilei, Copernicus, and the other was again this concept of the natural place. They affirmed there is no natural place, and there is no final reason. There is only causal reason. So there is the reason of movement if something make impact on other things. So there is causal reason, but final reason doesn't exist, because there is no goal, there is no teleology of the movement, and there is no center, absolute center. Everything is relative, everything is moving chaotically, as in Aristotelian version, but with no plan, with no goal, and everything is defined by the previous cause. So the cause belongs to the past, and no, there is no cause of the future. There is no eschatology, no goal. Something is causal. Everything is causal, and there is no center. There is no central center in space. Everything is related. So there is no anisotropic space. There is isotropic space. Isotropic space, so you go anyway with the same possibility, because there is no natural space for things. So everything is absolutely relativism, and that was destruction of Apollonian structure of space and time and thing and destiny and history. Everything is destroyed with that. So, and that was so-called scientific discovery. Postmodernists showed that was publicity. That was the work of the school of laboratory. Everything in Galilei was a kind of trick organized in order to convince the audience that he is great, but his personal motivations we could put aside. But what was the meaning of Galileo Galilei and the other founding father of modernity? They destroyed Logos of Apollo, represented in Plato and Aristotle, by the Logos of Cybele. And the Logos of Cybele was not their discovery. That was return to the third form of ancient Greek pre-socratic philosophy, represented by Democritus and later by Epicurus and Lucretius. They were put aside in the Christian version. Christian world vision was based on Plato and Aristotle, and Democritus and Epicurus and Lucretius were put aside, were forgotten. They were purged, I would say, by Logos of Apollo, because they belonged to the other vision, atomistic vision, to the materialistic vision, that was already in the ancient time, before Plato, they were anti-Indo-European, and they belonged to the context of Logos of Cybele. And they reappear in the Renaissance. So that is not new. That was something that was denied, that was put off, that was prohibited, I would say. That is some as prohibited knowledge that reappeared as a dominating one. So postmodernists show that there was nothing convincing in the new ideas, and they won not because they were more true. They have won because they won, because there was the kind of something changed in the mind of the Renaissance man that has opened the way to Logos of Cybele to return with scientific premises. There was atomism. Atomism belonged to the past. Atomism was rejected by Christian version of structure of cosmos, but by Christian cosmology, and it returned with Boyl, with Newton, with Gassendi, with Hobbes, with Descartes. So that was a kind, and that is not the chance that Marx has dedicated his doctorate to relations between Epicurus and Democritus. So the most modern philosopher of 19th century was dealt in his doctorate with very old problem of the matter, of the atomism, of the evolution. Because evolution, that of almost Darwinian type, we see Lucretius. Lucretius in his poem, that was the idea of the evolution of the species. So everything in the beginning, the species were confused, and little by little they developed into the creatures we know. So that was by the Venus, by the Holy Mother, that was produced. And in Lucretius there is purely Cybelean topics with purely scientific. So in this Lucretius concept there are as well black gods in the Democritus. Democritus say that the gods as well have bodies and diamonds as well. So that was atomic. So they live more than the body of human, but they as well die. They're so dying gods of Democritus, black gods or diamonds. So there was a mixture between scientific and mythological topics. But what kind of mythology was that? That was purely materialistic, Chthonian and Cybelean mythology. So at the same time, destruction of verticality, of old order, of old Middle Ages doctrine and Christian teaching was destruction that was replacement by new world vision based on Cybelean ideology, we could say. Cybelean ideology is strictly materialist and immanentist. There is no heaven, there is no transcendental God, there is substance, and everything grows from this substance. And the growth has reason as cause, but has no final reason. Because this growth is something that confuses. It is kind of growth as such, with no reason. So that is a kind of immanent process, and there is no attractor. There is no point to which this growth leads, because that is the huge immanent substance that has the goal in itself. So the reason is, the cause is, the final reason is not. So that was reflected in the cosmology of Copernicus. That is not the shift from geocentric to heliocentric doctrine, but that the reason of Copernican revolution was there is no center at all. Everything is relative. So there is the Earth was not the center, was not natural place of incarnation of God. Though it is something casual. The Earth is something casual. It's some ball that is revolving around some other fireball and so on in the context of the other balls in the infinite, disordered, chaotic atomic tradition. What is important that according to Democritus, atom could be small, invisible, or great. So that is something like very modern concept of the body, the heavenly body, of the particle, and so on. So that was reflected in the scientific vision, and what is considered today to be scientific is based. It is the same as Cybelean. Cybelean is scientific. What is not Cybelean, what, for example, insists on the existence of natural place, is not scientific, is mythological. But there is the change of the logos, and but that was not immediately. The logos of Cybele in scientific world vision appropriated some aspect of Apollonian rationalism, of logic, of dialectic, Dionysian dialectic, but everything was put under this sign of Cybele. So that was a kind post-Apollonian culture, and that was different with pre-Apollonian kingdom or civilization of Lepensky Vir or Vincha or Çatalhöyük. So the civilization of Great Mother was pre-Apollonian, and modernity is the same civilization with the same structure, with the same logos, but post-Apollonian. So that was appropriation of methods, of logic, of philosophy, and put under control of this materialistic, atomistic, immanentistic, substantialist domination. That was reflected in the politics. Very, very interesting. That was destruction of empire. That was the essence of modern politics. Because empire, as we have seen, was the normative organization of Christian political space. In Byzantine sense, but as well in the Western Catholic sense. So the concept of modern state and concept of nation were two concepts directed against empire. So that was atomic vision of the state of a social political atom, with no reason. And the difference between modern state and the empire, there is no reason, final reason. There is no natural space. There is no function or mission of catechon. That was the national statehood is directed against catechonical mission. So it is directed against the sacredness of empire and mission of empire. Modern state, by definition of Jean Bodin or Thomas Hobbes, is created from below as a kind of social contract, and that is Leviathan in Hobbes. The modern state is not reflection of the heavenly paradigm. It is created that has no reason, has no final reason. It has reason as cause. The reason of this modern state is social contract. So it is created by the people, by the individuals, in order to prevent them from the other individuals. So that is completely different concept of politics. And that is very, it is a revelation that Hobbes has called the Leviathan, the serpent, the modern state. Modern state is serpent, is a dragon that is mechanically organized from below in order to destroy everything that is sacred. The modern state is directed against the empire and its origin. And that appeared precisely in the Renaissance with scientific vision, with this completely new understanding of the religion, and the modern state should be secular. Secular, so with no religious sense. It could have church, Protestant or Catholic or Orthodox, but church should be separated and existed outside of politics. So the modern state is titanic, and modern national state is anti-Christian, anti-traditional, and anti-European, anti-Apollonian and Dionysian. It is purely titanic. It is serpent and dragon. And as such it was introduced as Leviathan in the beginning of the modernity. So we have what is nation? Nation as well, that is concept that appeared precisely in modern meaning in the Renaissance time. Nation, it is the people or population, better, population living inside of national states. So nation is absolutely artificial, and that is the community of citizens. Citizens who are those who have created the social contract. So the citizens is participating in social contracts, and citizen can redefine, concluding the other social context, the state. For example, the citizen could conclude that they don't want to live anymore in Belgium, and they want to have Flemish state and Wallonian state. They have all the right, because the Belgium has no reason. It is not reflection of something that is transcendental. It is the result of social contracts. So the people can create Yugoslavia, can destroy Yugoslavia if they want. They want because there is no Yugoslavia. There is no France. There is no Belgium. There is no Germany. They could easily create one Leviathan or destroy if they think that is better for them. So that is absolutely immanent concept of the politics. And it could be reflected in the vertical structure of state as a tradition of pre-Cybelean in the European tradition, but it is from the beginning Titanic. That is the new kind of hierarchy, Titanic bureaucracy, with new type of dominating figure. This type we should regard and describe carefully, because in modern state there are not the priests. It's clear that secularism put the priest outside of the government, so they could exist as cultural institution on the margin, for example, as cults or funerals or weddings, something like not so important, but less and less important, because putting the marginalization of the church is the process of the modernity, political modernity, and church should be put more and more outside of the political decision. In the case of the warriors that were noble class, the aristocracy of the traditional state, they should be marginalized as well. They should be a kind of mercenary by state. They could not have their arms with them. They should, because the arm was a symbol, a possession of arm, the symbol of warrior. They take the arm from the state, and when the state thinks that that is enough for them to fight, the state take the arms back. And it is difficult with sword, but it is easy with cannon or tank. So development of the state weapon or nuclear weapon, you could not possess it, being aristocrat warrior with little nuclear missile with private ownership. So, but if you have no weapon, you're not autonomous warrior. You are just hired mercenary that serve as a servant with something that is given to you by the state, and that is decided bureaucratically. So warrior is not the type that decides. Priests are not the type who decides, and who decides. And then appears new figure, bourgeois. That is we are calling that capitalist system, we are calling this bourgeois system. And bourgeois is a normative figure in the modernity and political way. And now we should regard or make kind of structural analysis of what is it. What is it? It is conventional wisdom that bourgeois belongs to the third state, tiers état, third state. That is third function. There you are. First, priests, second, warriors, and bourgeois, third. And it is called tiers état in French. Tiers état, третье сословие in Russian. But here lays misunderstanding, very interesting misunderstanding, because it is represented by the man that lives in the city, bourgeois, and is occupying with the commerce. He's commercial. That is bourgeois. So, but this figure was absent in the Turanian society that was nomadic and was very marginal in the traditional sedentary European and Indo-European society where existed third function. Pastoralists and cattlers in one case and peasants in the other case. But they were not bourgeois. So third function in the classical Indo-European society was or peasant or cattler, and not the merchant living in the city. So bourgeois is something new. It was as normative sense. We could not say that that is traditional third function that overcome first and second. It is not tiers état in the Indo-European sense. There is something else. And bourgeois and merchant living in the city is not cattler. He has nothing to do with cows, with sheep, with goats, and he has nothing to do with laboring earth. So he is not peasant. He is turned from that. But who that is? Who is bourgeois? Is something that is between warrior and peasant. That is very lazy peasant that doesn't want to work on the earth, and it is coward as a warrior because he could not affront the death. He is in middle, lazy peasant and coward warrior. So it is a slave. It is a kind of, in Russian language there is holop, the name, holop. Holop, it is slave of the master. So he helps to master to live good. So it is not a servant, we could say. It is not free or not free peasant working in its field, maybe paying taxes or giving something else. He doesn't participate in the battle. So he is between people and aristocracy, between second and first functions and third. Because the cities, in the European cities, were created, founded by warriors in order to be kind of fortress, in their military strategic relations with the space and with the people. So they were a kind of secondary worker serving these warriors. And that was artificial class that has grown with the growth of the commerce in this city. So their appearance as an important class begins precisely in the same moment with when begins the Cybelean revenge. So they is special form of new type, sociological type, living in the city, busy with the commerce, And that is important, that the symbol of Cybele, traditional symbol, that the Cybele has the town as the crown in form of town. So there is something bourgeois in that crown of town, and there is something perverted in the commerçants. So to be busy with commerce in our traditional Christian and Indo-European logic, we have no pattern, we have no example, we have no place for that, because it is not war, it is not walk, it is not religious rites. It's something that has no place in the traditional society, but it could exist in the margin of the society in order to facilitate some technical aspect, but that never was a kind of class or function, that never had its own mythology, its own ethic, its own tradition. And we see in bourgeois something completely unnatural for our tradition. And bourgeois, dealing with the commerce and with the exchange, they say mild commerce, douce commerce. It's not war, because they are covered. They could not take away as the warrior make, or they could peacefully work for their fields with embedded in the traditional society with many cultural traditions concerning any step in life, or that is the peasant life. That is the peasant turned from the tradition. That is warrior that could not fight. So that is perversion. The bourgeois is the ill type. It is completely sick, sociological sickness, a representation of perversion in our traditional way. So a majority of bourgeois were peasants, but the peasants turned from their natural state. And when the peasant, that by some reason has lost its possibility, its field, its possibility, its place in the village, its normal place, in its natural place of peasant, when it loses it, it comes to town. But who is the peasant in town? Nobody. He is idiot. Idiot in Greek sense that the person with no collective identity. So that is something individual, that is atomic. And the atom was the basis of the new science, materialistic science of Renaissance. So there is new and old figure, but that had no place in the traditional society. So that is something that was regarded with pity, maybe, in traditional society. It is ill peasant because lazy or too arrogant, and it is coward warrior that didn't want to fight. So that is perversion. It could always be underclass being. So bourgeois is underclass. Bourgeoisie is underclass. The group of sick, mad, perverted, anti-normal human being that are idiotical by semantic definition. So they have no organic relations with collective identity. Their identity is artificially constructed. So they didn't belong to the traditional warrior or agricultural societies, and they were devoid of any organic collective qualities. So they came to the city and they tried to find their way. And that is not the case that bourgeois were some from other places or other ethnic group, because they were individuals put in the city and not belonging to the traditional corporation and form. And they began to grow in number, and they began to define the normative vision of the social type, normative type. They have dethroned warriors, they have dethroned priests, and they have as well misrepresented third state, because they hated, the bourgeois hates peasants, because it exploits him. He don't let him to sell his things openly, because he buy it by itself, and they make a speculation. They're a speculator. They don't produce nothing, and they make a kind of balls of money in order to manipulate with production. So they unproductive. Bourgeois is unproductive. Peasants were productive. So, but at the same time, bourgeois were partly peasants, because they came to town from where? Some part from other ethnic groups or some marginal groups. They became bourgeois, but the majority, the growth of bourgeois state was from peasants. But now we see the real Noological mystery. But who were the peasants, European peasants? They were the member of civilization of Cybele under control of in the European horizon. And when they were turned from this control structure, they could the origins of this Cybelean origins of the peasantry could reveal. So that is a kind of liberation of the deepest level of peasant European identity, that taking from the special Christian and traditional aristocracy, feudal vertical society, was liberated. So they were bearers of some very ancient archetypes of ancient collective unconsciousness that was reanimated precisely in the moment of the end of the Middle Ages. So we see that modernity and all political theory that were developed in the later phases of modernity dealt with this bourgeois organization. The pure and the most important glorification of bourgeois is liberalism. So it is dealing with ideals in semantical sense, because the man devoid of any kind of collective identity is idiot in Greek sense. So liberalism is from the beginning idiotism. So that is glorification of ideals. The individuals devoid of any collective identity, it's clear. But the communism is dealing with the same concept. So because communists hated as well peasants. They think that everything is developing in the city. So, and the poor bourgeois are proletarian. The rich bourgeois are bourgeois. But both of them are purely modern in the conceptual structural sense, industrial figures living in the city, not outside of the city. So communism was idea that poor bourgeois should overcome rich bourgeois and creates the society where proletarian should dominate over bourgeois. But who are proletarian? that were ex-peasant coming to city with no poor ex-peasants, and these ex-peasants were devoid precisely in the communist conception from relations with the traditional society, and that was positive in the eyes of communists. So they were not more peasant, and being no more peasant in communist eyes was the same as having no relations with religion, with the cult, with the culture, with the language, with the traditions, and so on. They were as well a kind of the other form of idiots. They were rich idiots, or more or less easy idiots, bourgeois, as basic figure of liberalism, and poor idiots were proletarians. But they should be cut from tradition state, priests, warriors, or peasants, and they should be put in the artificial commercial structure, commercial spaces of the modern bourgeois city. That was one of the idea of communism, and that was good. If we read Marx's manifest, the majority of it dedicated what communism is not, Marxist communism. And Marx and Engels, they stressed that it is not enough to be anti-bourgeois to be communist. It is necessary to be post-bourgeois and not pre-bourgeois. And the criticism of the first part of manifest of Communist Party was directed against so-called aristocracy, anti-bourgeois, anti-capitalist tradition that were as well anti-bourgeois, but pretending to restore some pre-bourgeois tradition. So communism say no. In comparison with feudal or traditional society, communists should be on the side of bourgeois, of capitalism, but they should not only destroy traditional society, but they should help to destroy traditional society. But after the poor citizen of the city, bourgeois it is as well, that Bürger, that someone who lives in the burg, in the city, in town, poor citizen should overcome rich citizen after destroying any kind of traditional society. So proletarians as bourgeois are absolutely untraditional. There are two concepts of two idiotic, semantically idiotic concepts, because there is rich idiot and poor idiots, and poor idiots and the communist vision should win rich idiots, take richness from them and distribute among the idiots. And where is the peasants in this situation? They should be transformed in proletariat. They should be brought to the cities. That is the concept of how to merge the villages with the city. The village was the enemy of Marxism, of communism. So village should be destroyed and transformed in the city, and the peasant should be transformed in the worker, and workers should be normally industrial workers living in the city, working in the fabric. So that is as well mechanical vision, so that was materialistic as well as liberalism. And that is second political theory. Third political theory was as well absolutely Cybelean. That is maybe difficult for Serbian with patriotic feeling, but the idea that modern state is artificial creation. Modern state is based on destruction of empire. Modern state is based on the social contract, and nation is artificial creation of bourgeois. Nation is bourgeois concept, purely bourgeois concept. It is not organic community with the state, with warriors, priests, and peasants. The nation is the concept in center of which is the chauvinistic, egoistic citizen of the city, and the state is created as the city, not as empire, and the peasants as well were considered to be secondary for. So they live between one city and the other. They have no space, proper space. They were considered as citizen, but the term citizen. City is town. Peasant is not citizen. He's villager. So if in the normative concept of political nationalism, peasants were included, then we should speak citizens and villagers, for example. But we are speaking not only about citizens, because we consider peasants to be the citizens, the towners of the second sort. So they were a subhuman in some way, politically subhuman in nationalist, communist, and as well liberal concept. So that was the split in the third function in the beginning of modernity, the split between in the European peasantry, traditional, and this ex-peasantry, ex-peasants coming to town and becoming bourgeois or proletarian or nationalist. So that is why all three political theories, communism, liberalism, and nationalism, are in absolutely Cybelean, because modern nationalism is modern, is based on the bourgeois concept. So that is artificial unity of the citizens that accentuate not only the freedom of commerce, but most the defense of their own commercial interests by a nation or bureaucracy or state. So we have now we could apply that to geosophy of Europe. Where started the modernity? The modernity started partly in Italy, partly in the northern part of Europe, but the most clear and most bright examples of modernity was Great Britain, that began creation of this bourgeois version. That was not revolutionary bourgeois, but evolutionary bourgeois history. They tried to introduce more and more bourgeois elements in the government. So Hobbes was one of English political theorists, but with Cromwell and with Protestantism, with revolution, that was the bourgeois revolution. That was killing of the Tsar, of the monarch, that was a kind of symbolical action of the dethronement of the traditional Indo-European logos. And Protestantism was, as well as we have seen, a kind of Titanism inside of Christianity. And all these elements, the development of bourgeois, the regicide, the killing of monarch, and Protestantism, that was the England that was in the center, and the fight of Englishmen against Celt Catholic was inner drama, because that was the modernity was on the side of Anglo-Protestants, and tradition in their case, in this bipolarity case of English culture, tradition and continuity was on the side of the Celt. So that is why the Celts were, in that sense, defenders, the last defenders of more or less traditional society, in front of purely modernist Cybelean English society. It is very interesting that there was traditional concept of 4 empires in Christian culture. The first empire was Assyrian, the second empire was Achaemenid, the third empire was Greek, and the fourth empire was Roman. And that was considered, that was put in the context with Daniel, Prophet Daniel vision of the giant with the gold head, with silver breast, with copper metal, bronze, and thighs, and iron foots. And that was iron foots represented Roman Empire, most radical but traditional empire. And so this tradition had some ties with Catechon. That was transition of Catechon, and the Roman Empire was considered to be the last one where the Christ was born. So that is, we have normal concept of 4 empires, and fourth empire was Roman. Byzantine, they say Roman, including all the continuation with Third Rome and so on, with Russia and Bulgarian kingdoms and so on. And the idea that in the English Britain Revolution there was the concept of the Fifth Empire. Fifth Empire, that was called Fifth Monarchism. That was tendency that should be the other empire, beyond Roman one, beyond, that was considered beyond the Rome as Catholic. So that was a kind of modern secular Protestant empire, and that was called Fifth Monarchism. And there were 2 versions of it. That was interesting in Dutch. In Holland, there was Jewish version of it, that the Fifth Empire should be Jewish one. That was among the Jews of the circle of Spinoza, of the philosopher Spinoza. That was Anglo-Saxon concept of Fifth Monarchism, and they were linked with the same circles of Protestant, English Protestant living in Holland and coming back to England to give the status of fifth monarch to Cromwell. So, but in the story of this giant, that is the symbol of this Fourth Empire, there is Ergile, Glina, Ergile concept that in the fits, iron fits of giant, there are something as sand, we could say, and this sand is the fifth element in giant, and thanks to this sand the giant will fall. So there is a kind of symbol of anti-Christian, post-Christian, post-traditional element, fifth element, the sand, that makes all this empire not stable. So the Fifth Empire is precisely the end of empire, the destruction of empire, destruction of traditional order, because it has to do with sand, the fifth element in the vision of Daniel. And that is the concept of Fifth Empire, of Fifth Monarchy, that was British Empire. British Empire was anti-empire. That was based on bourgeois concept, on nationalism, liberalism. Socialism was absent. That was the first and the third political theory represented in this British Empire. So, British Empire was the first modern empire that was anti-traditional empire, and that was one of the main sources, philosophical as well, with the philosophy of common sense. Common sense philosophy is absolutization of the little individual with idiotic scale of thought, with no great revelation, some mediocrity, the absolutized mediocrity represented by Reid, by Ferguson, and that was the basic of North American society, because these Scotland philosophers of common sense, they were considered to be philosophical fathers of North American society. That was glorification of idiotic minds with very narrow interest, with pragmatism, with little concern as development of Protestant Titanism and positivism. I'm calling that positive subject. That is second man in the three-man theory of Tauler, of German mystic. So that was evolutionary bourgeois, but at the same time in France there was preparation of revolutionary bourgeois concept. That culmination was in French Revolution, with the concept of purely anti-Christian motivation, with Scarlet Woman as the symbol of the freedom of the with the killing of monarch. So that was as well the other revolutionary form, with socialism already, with the concept of preparing socialism, social democracy idea, absolutely immanent, anti-Christian, openly, not in the Protestant way, but purely atheistic, materialistic, and Enlightenment theory was a kind of culmination of all this modernity. And so modernity started with that, with the revenge of Cybele, and all the history of modernity was a kind of purification of this noological pattern. So the civilization of Cybele became more and more Cybelean. So that was all traces of the previous in the European traditional society were purged, were cleansed. So that was a kind of creation from more and more perfect Logos of Cybele, and because, for example, what was revolutionary 300 years ago, that was after that was considered conservative. So there were new stages, but that was construction of Babel. That was construction of very ancient type of civilization. And when we are dealing with modern feminism, that is the finalization of the process. It is not the beginning of something. So when now Cybele appears as it is, this march of Madonna in New York against Trump, with thousands and hundreds of thousands of women with rose cats disguise in order to kill the Trump, that is a kind of call for castration of the male figure, that they try to sacrifice Trump as symbol of patriarchate. So he is macho, male, complete. He is the symbol of the previous stage of civilization. So modern feminism and politics and minds in the education and the social norms and this juridical acceptance of homosexuality, that was the part of the Cybelean procession. Homosexuality was a kind of part of typically Cybelean cult. They participate in the procession as special type of priests. The homosexuals are priests of Cybele. So there is now everything come back to the pure image of that. But feminism didn't start yesterday, or doesn't start today. That feminism started with Titanism. The modernity was metaphysically feminist, because materialist, because orientated against this heroic type of patriarchy in the European culture. Bourgeois is feminist class already, because it is not warrior, it is not worker, it is parasitic class, and that is the worst form of feminine nature. It is not in the European or Christian concept of femininity. It's something completely different. It is Cybelean femininity. And Werner Sombart has said that capitalism began with the mistresses, because when the people had wives, so they were not so obliged to have more and more money, but having mistresses, they were obliged to participate in the speculations more and more, because they needed excessive amount of money, and mistresses were parasites that demanded more and more, with no work, with no and so on. According to Werner Sombart, that was a kind of one of motivation of capitalist development, of capitalist society. But it is anecdotic, but a sociological anecdote. So, all our science is feminist, because it is materialist, it's Cybelean, and we are living in the world of Cybele, in the modernity, and now we are, and we will speak about that later tomorrow, the last session of these lectures. But we are living inside this kind of civilization. So the moment of Noomakhia we are living in, it is the moment of revenge of pre-Indo-European existential horizon, artificially with bourgeois, or organic but very ancient with our world vision, scientific world vision, based on this lowest level of the peasant identity of European peasantry. So we have a kind of special image now of modernity that is explained as well with Christian vision. That is the end of Catechon. The Catechon has fallen. The Catechon was the king, the Tsar, the emperor that defended traditional society, and that was defeated by modern political system with democracy, national states, globalization today, and that was the fate. The same was the fate for Christian faith. That was the fate for all three traditional function, because there is less and less peasants. So we have no peasants in Europe. We are losing them. Everybody is citizen. Everybody is bourgeois, or poor bourgeois, proletarian, or rich bourgeois, and we are living precisely in the post-Catechonian cycle. So that is when the Satan is liberated, when there is a kind of intrusion of underground tendency that we see around us. So everything fits well in this noological analysis. Now we see that this noology that could appear a little bit abstract, a little bit too metaphysical, has to do with the reality we're living in. So we are inside of this Noomakhia. We are part of this fight and the battle of the Logos. And we could not be free from that. We are defined absolutely. Everything in us is defined by this moment of Noomakhia. We consider the reality as we are taught, as it is imposed. We could not deal with reality as such. We are dealing with reality through a kind of reading, the type of reading through paradigm. And this paradigm is defined now by Logos of Cybele. But the knowledge that there are two other logos help us to see relativity of modernity and to put the modernity in the context of knowledge and to define as well geographical place we are in. So if French and England were the first in order to promote this in the geography of Europe, Latin worlds and Austrian Empire resisted against that. Russia resisted more than other. Ottoman Empire resisted because that was as well traditional society. But when traditional empires have fallen, new modern states appeared. And being modern, they were doomed in order, if we think that they could transmit traditional spirit. Modernity and traditional are incompatible. Creating national state instead of traditional kingdom, we are already doomed. The creation of modern state, Russian or Serbian, is the end of Russian and Serbian. That will be the state, modern but not Russian and not Serbian. What is modern could not be really Serbian or Russian or German. It is already simulacrum. It is already something Sibelian. So that is why maybe that could explain as well, I'm anticipating the next lecture, maybe that could explain as well some aspect of modern Serbian history on Yugoslavia, Serbia, because after liberating from Ottoman Empire that was traditional, that was the chance to revival, and the chance was lost because that by many reasons. But that's the next lecture. We will maybe openly discuss that. I have some concept, but in order to finish, I think that knowledge and geography now gives us the key to interpret the world we live in. Please.
So I would just like to run this by you in the anticipation of the lesson tomorrow, kind of the same way. And I would argue that Serbs are actually the chosen children of Cybele, if we look at our history. So we were liberated as peasants from the Ottoman Empire, which was a catechon in its very essence. The Sultan is the Caliph, he is the ruler of Darul Islam, against Darul Harb, which is the realm of the Satan or Shaitan. The Austrian Empire was also catechon. He protected the Catholic ecumena from the Protestant heresy and the Muslim invaders who were Satan in that cosmos. We inadvertently led Russia into a war because the Russian catechon, the Russian Tsar, entered on our side, and we destroyed three empires as ourselves. Now, from when we created our state, it was, as Eckentrich, our historian, said, a heaven for peasants. So it was a peasant republic in a sense. The king was chosen by parliament, eventually. We also were full of regicide. We killed Knyaz Mikhail, we killed Kai Alexander, we killed Franz Ferdinand, the heir of Catechon of Austria. The raison d'etre of the Serbian state was to protect the Serbian people from killing each other via haiduks and mutual raids, etc., and to protect them from the Ottoman Empire, and eventually to protect the multitude of religious and ethnic identities inside Yugoslavia from each other, and from invasion from Italy and Austria. So it was a purely modernistic raison d'etre to exist as a state. We had a thing called Timočka Buna, which was a revolt from peasants because the state took their weapons away, because it needed to create them from free peasant warriors, in a sense, into servants of the state. We are, in a sense, since our second resurrection, after we were liberated our Central Ottoman Empire, the children of Cybele, and we have remained it ever since, even though we think ourselves as conservatives and traditionalists. So, just the same way for tomorrow.
Very interesting, very interesting. We are going to develop that, but in some sense we are all children of Cybele, Russian as well, and that is a special idea, but this tendency, matriarchal tendency, is almost prevailing in Russia. We have constructed completely Sibelian communist society with domination of the mother of iron. So there was nothing heroic in that. That was purely materialistic and matriarchal system, and we had many matriarchal tradition in our peasant, absolutely peasant society. So we should be, it is not political propaganda knowledge, so we could accept something that is not so pleasant. So we're living in a difficult time, and I agree, that fits very well in this description and what is going on now in Russia or in Serbia as well. So, in order to make correct description of what is going on, we need to understand the many levels of that. So, and that is very important, that nothing is lost forever. So, in this knowledge, the eternity exists, eternity as possibility. So, if there is something that prevails today, that doesn't mean that that is in eternity so. So there is the other aspect. So alternative in Logos, Noomakhia could not be closed. It continues. So if it continues that we have something other than you have described, and I'm sure I could testify that there is in Serbian people something other. Sure. Absolutely, and that is seen clearly in Russian as well, in other people. So, but I agree. So I am very, very happy that you could manage the concept in some way in order to apply to concrete situation. That is precisely my idea. That to give kind of tools in order to analysis, and the results of analysis could be unexpectable for us, for myself. That is only tools, metaphysical tools, and now we could questions or something or commentaries. Yes, please.
Yeah, I have a question. When you mentioned the bourgeois class as a part of the peasant class, can you or could you explain the bourgeois class as a remnant of the hunters-gatherers society, as gatherer part of the society, because there are very similar things they do. They only, for example, they use as the main tool for survival gathering stuff they didn't make.
Interesting idea. Maybe I didn't think about that, but that is very interesting remark. About bourgeois as well, there is interesting analysis of Marcel Mauss and Georges Bataille concerning how this, but gatherer-hunter society was based on the balance. You take, maybe you don't produce what you take, but you give what you take. So that is in the rites, in initiation. So you eat, you are eaten. So the main rite of initiation is to be eaten. You kill the beast, you are killed by the beast. So there is a kind of, you obtain, you lose. So if you gather too much, you should destroy it in the orgy. That was based on the balance. And the bourgeois logic is a little bit more warrior-like. So that is not balance. So you gather more and more, accumulate. So there is a kind of asymmetry, and you don't destroy that. So that is the growth, because gatherer society is based on the balance, and bourgeois consciousness is open, it's conflictual. So they try to have all the richness, take, accumulate, and the growth of richness is the ideology of bourgeois class. So it is conflictual, so it creates unbalance. That is the difference. But maybe methodologically it could be some parallels.
In a way, yes, that is true, but when you accumulate enough as a gatherer or as a bourgeois, you become the target of the other. And eventually, in the end, it's all taken away from you. You do not get to keep anything.
But yes, but in hunter-gatherers system, there was the idea of potlatch, of destruction of the extra products. That is main feature of gatherer society. So not only when you become the target, but when you accumulate too much, you should destroy that, or you will destroy it. Not because they would like to take that, but that is illness. But bourgeois is illness, it's sickness. They try to accumulate more and more, and all the construction of provision of development of modern economy is based on limitless growth of the rich. So they could not imagine the world when there is a limited quantity of goods. So the goods should be produced more and more, oligarchs should be more and more rich, and idea itself that it could have limits goes against the concept of bourgeois mind. So they could not stop by themselves, and they should be killed everybody as a kind of the other wave of revenge. So they gather, because that is damned part in the Bataille, Georges Bataille concept, damned part. So in order to keep the society economically, materially normal, balanced, you should destroy its damned part. It's your damnation. But capitalism is accumulation of damnation. So it is a kind of, they commit more and more crime and injustice in order to make this damned part grow. That maybe they are hunter-gatherers, but they are mad hunter and gatherers, bourgeois. So they follow some pattern that is conflictual, as for example, but the warriors deals with death openly, heroically. They deal with unbalanced situation. They are traumatically to be warriors, to have the trauma, but bourgeois would like to have a trauma and not have a trauma. So that is completely a perverted type of man, bourgeois. So they would like to consume and not produce. They'd like to have and not pay. They want to trick and not to be tricked. So they want the eternal growth that will be recompensed by nothing. So that is with no pay, with eternal life, artificial intelligence. So that is pure pathology. Bourgeois class, modernity is pure pathology in any senses. And but this interesting remark.